Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stepped out of her car in front of the old ranch house. The July heat in Texas was merciless, and she wondered if taking this job as a housekeeper was the right decision. After her divorce 6 months ago, she needed steady work and a fresh start. The job posting had been simple: help with cooking and cleaning for a single father and his daughter on a small ranch outside San Antonio. The man who answered the door was tall and weathered, with dark hair streaked with early gray, despite looking to be in his 30s. His calloused hands and sun-darkened skin told the story of someone who worked hard outdoors. What struck her most were his eyes, tired but kind, carrying a weight that seemed too heavy for his age. "You must be Sarah," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Jake Whitefeather. Thank you for coming all the way out here." Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the genuine relief in his voice. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity, Mr. Whitefeather." "Just Jake, please." He stepped aside to let her in. The house was clean but clearly showed signs of someone struggling to keep up with everything. Dishes were stacked neatly by the sink, but dust gathered in corners that hadn't been reached in weeks. "I have to be honest with you. I've never been good at the household stuff. My wife used to handle all of that." Sarah noticed how his voice caught slightly when he mentioned his wife. She didn't press for details, sensing the pain there. "That's what I'm here for. Why don't you show me around?" As they walked through the modest but comfortable home, Jake explained his situation. He ran a small cattle operation that barely made ends meet. Between dawn feedings, fence repairs, and dealing with buyers, he struggled to keep house and care for his 8-year-old daughter, Emma. "She's at school right now," Jake said as they entered a small bedroom decorated with drawings of horses and dream catchers. "She'll be home around 4. Fair warning, she's been through a lot lately. Lost her mother 2 years ago to cancer. She doesn't warm up to people easily anymore." Sarah's heart tightened. She understood loss, though hers was different. Her own marriage had ended not in death but in betrayal, leaving her childless and starting over at 35. "I understand. I'll give her space and let her set the pace." The kitchen was where Jake seemed most helpless. Boxes of cereal lined the counter next to takeout containers and a stack of frozen dinners. The refrigerator held milk, leftover pizza, and not much else. "I know it's not much," Jake said, running his hand through his hair. "I try to cook real meals, but by the time I finish with the cattle and fix whatever broke that day, I'm usually grabbing whatever's fastest." "This is exactly why I'm here," Sarah assured him. "A growing child needs proper nutrition, and you need real food to keep up your strength for all that ranch work." Something in her tone must have resonated because Jake's shoulders relaxed for the first time since she'd arrived. "I have to admit I was worried about hiring someone. Emma and we've gotten used to it being just us. But I can see she needs things I can't give her. A woman's touch around the house, someone who knows how to braid hair properly, that sort of thing." Sarah spent the next hour getting acquainted with the kitchen and making a mental list of groceries needed. Jake worked outside but checked in periodically, clearly anxious about how this new arrangement would work. She could see he was a devoted father doing his best in impossible circumstances. When the school bus rumbled up the long driveway, Sarah watched through the window as a small figure with long black hair jumped down and walked slowly toward the house. Emma Whitefeather was beautiful, with her father's dark eyes and a serious expression that seemed too old for her young face. Jake met his daughter at the door, and Sarah could hear them talking quietly in the hallway. When they entered the kitchen, Emma stayed close to her father's side, studying Sarah with careful, measuring eyes. "Emma, this is Sarah. She's going to help us with cooking and keeping house," Jake said gently. "Hi, Emma," Sarah said, keeping her voice warm but not overly enthusiastic. She'd learned that grieving children often felt overwhelmed by adults who tried too hard. "Your dad tells me you like horses." Emma nodded but didn't speak. She was clearly sizing up this new presence in her carefully guarded world. "I was just about to start making some real food for dinner," Sarah continued. "Would you like to help me figure out what to make?" For the first time, a flicker of interest crossed Emma's face. She looked up at her father, who nodded encouragingly. "What do you like to eat?" Sarah asked, opening the refrigerator and looking at its sparse contents. "Pancakes," Emma said quietly. "But Dad says they're not dinner food," Sarah smiled. "Well, who says we can't have breakfast for dinner sometimes? How about pancakes with scrambled eggs and some fruit?" Emma's face brightened slightly and Jake looked relieved. As Sarah began pulling ingredients together, She realized that maybe this job would be more than just cooking and cleaning. Maybe she could help this small family heal, and perhaps find some healing of her own in the process. The kitchen filled with the sound of mixing bowls and quiet conversation as Emma gradually warmed up enough to help measure flour. For the first time in months, the house felt like a home rather than just a place where two people existed together in their separate grief. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah began working at the White Feather Ranch, and she was starting to understand the delicate balance of this small family. Jake left before sunrise each morning to tend the cattle, returning for lunch covered in dust and sweat. Emma went to school but spent her afternoons quietly doing homework at the kitchen table while Sarah prepared dinner. The little girl was slowly opening up, though progress came in small moments. She would ask Sarah questions about ingredients while cooking, or mention something that happened at school. Sarah learned that Emma was smart and observant, but carried herself with the careful reserve of a child who had learned that people could disappear without warning. "Sarah, why did you come here?" Emma asked one afternoon while they made chocolate chip cookies together. Her small hands carefully dropped spoonfuls of dough onto the baking sheet. The question caught Sarah off guard. She'd been expecting something about cooking techniques, not something so personal. "Well, I needed a job and your dad needed help. Sometimes things work out like that." Emma considered this seriously. "Did you have a family before?" Sarah paused in her stirring. She'd been dreading this conversation but knew it was inevitable. "I was married, but it didn't work out. We didn't have any children. Do you miss having a family?" The innocent question hit deeper than Emma could know. Sarah set down her spoon and looked at this thoughtful child who seemed to understand loss in ways most 8-year-olds shouldn't have to. "Sometimes. But I like being here with you and your dad. You're becoming like family to me." Emma smiled, the first real unguarded smile Sarah had seen from her. "I like having you here too. Dad's happier when you're around." It was true. Over the weeks, Sarah had watched Jake's constant tension begin to ease. He still worked from dawn to dusk, but he lingered over the real meals she prepared, and she'd caught him humming while he worked in the barn. The house felt lighter somehow, filled with the sounds of actual cooking instead of microwaves beeping. That evening, as they sat around the kitchen table eating homemade chicken and dumplings, Emma surprised them both. "Dad, can Sarah teach me to braid my hair like she does hers?" Jake looked up from his plate, a mix of gratitude and something else, maybe relief, crossing his face. "That sounds like a great idea, sweetheart. I never could figure out all those fancy braids." After dinner, Sarah sat on the couch with Emma between her knees, gently working the child's long black hair into a French braid. Emma's hair was beautiful, thick and silky, and Sarah took her time, enjoying the quiet intimacy of the moment. "My mom used to do this," Emma said softly. "I haven't had braids in a long time." Sarah's hand stilled for a moment. This was the first time Emma had mentioned her mother directly. "What was she like?" "She was pretty and she smelled like flowers. She used to sing to me at night." Emma's voice was wistful but not sad. "Dad doesn't sing, he tries, but he's not very good at it." Sarah laughed softly. "Well, we all have different talents. Your dad is amazing with the cattle and fixing things. That's pretty special. Are you going to stay here forever?" Emma asked suddenly. The question hung in the air. Sarah realized she hadn't thought much about the future lately. She'd been so focused on day-to-day life with the White Feathers that she'd stopped planning ahead for the first time in years. "I don't know about forever," Sarah said honestly, "but I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon." "Is that okay with you?" Emma nodded firmly. "Good. I don't want you to leave." From the kitchen, Jake listened to this conversation while washing dishes, a smile tugging at his lips. For the first time since his wife's death, his daughter was forming an attachment to someone new. He'd been worried about that, afraid Emma would never trust anyone again. But Sarah had approached his daughter with such patience and genuine care. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Jake found Sarah sitting on the front porch, enjoying the cooler night air. The crickets were singing and the sky was full of stars that were impossible to see in the city. "Thank you," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "For what?" "For the way you are with Emma. She hasn't talked about her mother like that since the funeral, and she's never asked anyone to braid her hair." Sarah looked out at the dark pasture where she could see the shadowy shapes of cattle. "She's a special little girl. She's been through so much, but she's still open to caring about people." That says a lot about how you've raised her. Jake was quiet for a moment. Some days I feel like I'm failing her. Like she needs things I can't give her. You're not failing her, Sarah said firmly. You're loving her and providing for her and showing up every single day. That's what good parents do. Is that what you think? That I'm a good parent? The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. I think you're an amazing parent, and Emma thinks so too, even if she's too young to put it into words. They sat in comfortable silence, both thinking about the changes the past few weeks had brought to their lives. Neither wanted to admit how much they'd come to depend on this new arrangement, or how it was becoming something more than just employer and employee. Inside the house, Emma lay in bed thinking about her day. For the first time in 2 years, she was allowing herself to imagine what it might be like to have a mother figure again. Sarah wasn't trying to replace her mom. She was becoming something new, something special in her own right, and maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what their little family needed. The autumn air was crisp as Sarah hung laundry on the line behind the house. 2 months had passed since she'd started working for the Whitefeathers, and she could hardly remember what her life had been like before. The rhythm of ranch life had become natural to her. Early mornings preparing Jake's coffee and lunch, afternoons with Emma, evenings cooking hearty meals that brought the small family together around the kitchen table. Emma had blossomed during this time. The quiet, guarded child was still there, but now she laughed regularly and chattered about school friends and playground adventures. She'd grown more comfortable with physical affection too, often leaning against Sarah, while they cooked or read together. It was during one of these quiet afternoon moments that Emma made a statement that stopped Sarah's world. They were making apple pie from fruit they'd picked at a nearby orchard, Emma's small hands working carefully to arrange apple slices in the crust Sarah had rolled out. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and comfort. Sarah, Emma said without looking up from her work, I've been thinking about something. What's that, sweetheart? Emma was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if she'd forgotten the thought. Finally, the little girl looked up with those serious dark eyes that always seemed to see more than they should. I know you're not my real mom, Emma said carefully, but you feel like a mom to me? And I was wondering, would it be okay if I pretended you were? Sarah's hand stilled on the rolling pin. The simple, innocent request hit her heart like a physical blow. She'd spent years trying to have children with her ex-husband, enduring disappointments and medical procedures and ultimately the crushing realization that it might never happen. And here was this beautiful child, offering her the one thing she'd always wanted most. Oh, Emma, Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. That would be more than okay. It would make me the happiest person in the world. Emma's face lit up with pure joy. Really? You wouldn't mind? Mind? Sweetheart, I've been thinking of you as my daughter for weeks now. The admission surprised Sarah even as she said it, but she realized it was completely true. Emma launched herself around the kitchen island and wrapped her arms around Sarah's waist. I love you, Mom, she whispered against Sarah's apron. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she hugged the child close. I love you too, baby girl. So very much. They stayed like that for several minutes, both understanding that something profound had just shifted in their relationship. When they finally pulled apart, Emma's eyes were bright with excitement. Can I call you Mom in front of Dad? Will he be okay with it? Sarah hesitated. She and Jake had grown closer over the months, sharing conversations on the porch, working together on household projects. Moments of understanding that felt like more than just employer and employee. But they'd never discussed what was happening between them, and she wasn't sure how he'd feel about Emma calling another woman Mom. Let's talk to him together, Sarah suggested. We'll see what he thinks. When Jake came in for lunch covered in dirt from fixing fence posts, he immediately sensed the excitement radiating from both Emma and Sarah. Emma practically bounced in her chair as they ate grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Dad? Emma finally burst out, unable to contain herself any longer. I asked Sarah if I could call her Mom and she said yes. Is that okay with you? Jake's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked from his daughter's eager face to Sarah's nervous expression, processing what this meant. His first thought wasn't concern or jealousy, it was relief. Emma was choosing to love again, to trust again. And she was choosing Sarah, who had proven herself to be exactly the kind of mother his daughter deserved. Emma, he said slowly, That's completely up to you. But I think Sarah would make a wonderful mom. Emma squealed with delight and launched herself at her father, hugging him tight. Thank you, Dad. This is the best day ever. Over Emma's head, Jake's eyes met Sarah's. In that look, they shared something deeper than words. An understanding that their little family was becoming real in ways neither had expected. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Jake found Sarah sitting on the porch swing they'd hung together the month before. The autumn night was cool and she'd wrapped herself in one of his old flannel shirts. That's quite a development, he said, settling beside her on the swing. Are you really okay with it? Sarah asked. I know it might seem fast or presumptuous. Jake was quiet for a moment, gently pushing the swing with his feet. Sarah, when my wife died, I thought Emma would never recover. She stopped laughing, stopped playing, stopped being a kid. I was terrified that I'd lost both of them, my wife to cancer and my daughter to grief. He turned to look at her in the dim porch light. You brought her back to life. You brought both of us back to life, if I'm being honest. If she wants to call you Mom, then as far as I'm concerned, you've earned that title. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again. She's an amazing little girl, Jake, being her mom. Even just having her think of me that way. It's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. You know, Jake said softly, I think Maria would have liked you. She would have been happy knowing Emma had someone like you to love her. It was the first time he'd spoken his late wife's name in front of Sarah, and she understood the trust implicit in that sharing. Inside the house, Emma lay in her bed with a huge smile on her face, thinking about calling Sarah Mom tomorrow and the next day and all the days after that. For the first time since her mother's death, the future felt bright and full of possibilities. The little family was becoming something new, something healed, something whole. Winter arrived early that year, bringing with it challenges that tested the growing bonds of the Whitefeather family. Sarah had been living and working at the ranch for 4 months now, and Emma calling her mom had become as natural as breathing. But the outside world was about to intrude on their peaceful existence in ways none of them expected. It started with a phone call on a gray December morning. Sarah was making breakfast when Jake came in from the barn, his face troubled as he hung up his cell phone. That was the school, he said, sitting heavily at the kitchen table. Emma's teacher wants to meet with us this afternoon. Apparently there's been some confusion about family relationships. Sarah's stomach dropped. What kind of confusion? Emma's been calling you Mom at school. Some of the other kids told their parents, and now there are questions about who you are and whether Emma's being properly cared for. Emma, who had been quietly eating her pancakes, looked up with worry in her dark eyes. Am I in trouble? Jake quickly reassured her. No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes adults need to understand situations better. That's all. The meeting at Emma's school that afternoon was uncomfortable from the start. Mrs. Peterson, Emma's teacher, was kind but clearly concerned. Principal Williams was more direct. We need to understand the living situation, he said, looking between Jake and Sarah. Emma refers to Ms. Martinez as her mother, but there's no record of marriage or legal guardianship. We're required to ensure all our students are in safe, stable environments. Sarah felt her cheeks burn. She and Jake had never discussed their relationship status beyond employer and employee, though the lines had blurred considerably over the months. Now their unconventional family arrangement was under scrutiny. Sarah is our housekeeper, Jake said carefully, but she's also become like family to Emma. After losing her mother, Emma has formed a strong attachment. I understand that, Mrs. Peterson said gently. But Emma talks about Sarah as if she lives there permanently, as if they're a real family unit. The other children are confused, and some parents have expressed concern. Sarah wanted to disappear. She felt like a fraud, a woman playing house with someone else's family. Perhaps I should clarify with Emma that she shouldn't call me Mom at school, she said quietly. No. Emma's voice was small but fierce. You are my mom. Not my birth mom, but my real mom. You take care of me and love me and help me with homework and make me feel safe. The adults in the room were silent, struck by the intensity of the 8-year-old's declaration. Principal Williams cleared his throat. We're not questioning the quality of care Emma receives. She's clearly thriving. But the situation is unusual. We need some clarity about the long-term stability of this arrangement. Driving home in Jake's truck, the three of them were quiet. Emma sat between them, her hand firmly clasped in Sarah's. Are you going to leave? Emma finally asked, her voice small. No, baby, Sarah said immediately. I'm not going anywhere. But that evening, after Emma was in bed, the conversation between Jake and Sarah was heavy with unspoken concerns. Maybe they have a point, Sarah said, pacing the kitchen. I'm not really Emma's mother. I'm not your wife. I'm just someone who works here and got too attached. Jake stood up from the table. Is that really what you think? That you're just the help who got too attached? What else am I, Jake? We've never talked about what this is, what we are. I love Emma like she's my own child, and She stopped, unable to finish the thought. And what? He asked, stepping closer. And I love you too, she whispered. But I don't know where that leaves us. I don't know what we're doing here. Jake was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. What if I told you that I've been thinking the same thing? That somewhere along the way you stopped being just the housekeeper and became the woman I can't imagine living without? Sarah's breath caught. Jake, I know it's complicated. I know there's Emma to think about and the ranch and a dozen practical considerations. But these past months watching you with my daughter, seeing how you've made this house a home, Sarah, I've fallen in love with you. Completely. Before she could respond, they heard Emma's bedroom door creak open. Small footsteps padded down the hallway, and Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, tears streaming down her face. I heard you talking, she said, running to Sarah and wrapping her arms around her waist. Please don't leave, Mom. Please don't let them make you leave. Sarah knelt down to Emma's level, cupping the child's face gently. Listen to me very carefully, sweetheart. I am not going anywhere. Those people at school, they just don't understand our family yet. But we'll help them understand. How? Emma hiccuped. Sarah looked up at Jake, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. We'll show them that families come in all different shapes. That love is what makes a family, not just paperwork or laws. Jake knelt down beside them. Emma, what would you think if I asked Sarah to marry me? If we made our family official? Emma's eyes went wide. Really? You'd marry Mom? Sarah's heart was pounding. Emma, your dad hasn't actually asked me yet. Jake took Sarah's hand. Sarah Martinez, will you marry me? Will you be Emma's mom, not just in your heart, but officially? Will you be my wife and help me run this crazy ranch and raise this amazing daughter? Emma held her breath, looking between the two adults who had become her whole world. Sarah looked at this man who had given her the chance to love his daughter, who had become her best friend, and now was offering her everything she'd ever wanted.
Yes, she whispered.
Yes to all of it. Emma's squeal of joy could probably be heard all the way to town. The next morning, they would call the school and explain that the family situation was becoming more permanent. The community might take time to adjust, but the three of them knew they were already exactly where they belonged. Spring came early to the ranch that year, bringing with it a sense of renewal and possibility. Sarah's engagement ring, a simple diamond surrounded by small turquoise stones that Jake had chosen to honor his Cherokee heritage, caught the morning, light as she prepared breakfast for her soon-to-be family. Emma had thrown herself into wedding planning with the enthusiasm only an 8-year-old could muster. The kitchen table was covered with bridal magazines she'd gotten from the library, and she'd appointed herself the official wedding coordinator. Mom, you have to have flowers in your hair, Emma declared, looking up from a magazine spread. And I think we should have the wedding here at the ranch so all the cattle can watch. Sarah laughed, ruffling Emma's hair as she set a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her. The cattle might not be the best wedding guests, sweetheart. They might be more interested in the grass than the ceremony. But this is our home, Emma said seriously. This is where we became a family. That's where the wedding should be. Jake walked in from his morning chores, overhearing the conversation. I think Emma has a point, he said, kissing Sarah's cheek and accepting his coffee gratefully. This place is special to us. Why go somewhere else? Over the past few months since their engagement, they'd faced some challenges from the community. Some people understood their unconventional love story, but others questioned whether Sarah was taking advantage of a widowed man or whether it was appropriate for Emma to call someone Mom so soon after losing her birth. Mother. The school situation had improved after Jake and Sarah met with Principal Williams and explained their engagement. Mrs. Peterson had become one of Emma's biggest supporters, even helping her with a Mother's Day card for Sarah. But there had been difficult moments too. At the grocery store, Sarah had overheard two women discussing how that Mexican Woman was moving in on poor Jake Whitefeather and whether it was right for Emma to have a replacement mother so quickly. Sarah had left her shopping cart and walked out of the store that day, sitting in her car and crying for 20 minutes. She'd begun to doubt whether she was doing the right thing, whether she was somehow disrespecting Maria's memory or confusing Emma. It was Emma who had unknowingly provided the reassurance Sarah needed. That evening, while they were looking through old photo albums, Emma had pointed to a picture of Maria and said, "I think my first mom would like you. Mom, Sarah. Dad says she always wanted me to be happy. And I'm the happiest I've ever been." Now, planning their summer wedding, Sarah felt more confident in their choices. They decided on a simple ceremony in the backyard, with Emma as the maid of honor and Jake's brother David as best man. Sarah's sister would drive down from Dallas, and Jake's elderly grandmother, who still lived on the Cherokee reservation, would perform a traditional blessing. "I have an idea," Emma announced one afternoon while she and Sarah were baking cookies. "What if we plant a special tree after the wedding? Like a family tree, but a real one." Sarah paused in her cookie cutting. "That's a beautiful idea, Emma. What made you think of that?" "Well, Grandma Whitefeather says that Cherokee people believe trees are like family. They have roots that go deep and branches that reach for the sky. And you're becoming part of our tree now. So maybe we should plant a real one to celebrate." The wisdom in Emma's 8-year-old perspective never ceased to amaze Sarah. "I think that's perfect, sweetheart. We'll pick out a special tree together." As the wedding date approached, Sarah found herself thinking often about the journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she'd been a newly divorced woman taking a job as a housekeeper because she needed work and a fresh start. She'd never imagined she'd find a family or that a little girl would choose her to be a mother. The night before the wedding, Sarah sat on the porch swing with Emma, who was too excited to sleep. The summer air was warm and filled with the sound of crickets. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Emma asked. "A little," Sarah admitted. "Good nervous, though. Like before something wonderful happens." "I'm not nervous at all," Emma said confidently. "I know we're going to be happy. We're already happy, but tomorrow it becomes official." "Emma, I want you to know something," Sarah said, taking the child's hand. "When I marry your dad tomorrow, I'm not trying to replace your first mom. I'm just adding to the love in your life." "You can love both of us," Emma nodded solemnly. "I know, Mom, Sarah. My first mom lives in my heart and you live in my everyday life. There's room for both." Inside the house, Jake was having his own pre-wedding moment. He stood in his bedroom looking at the framed photo of Maria he'd kept on the nightstand. For the first time in months, he spoke to her directly. "I hope you understand," he said quietly. "I hope you know that loving Sarah doesn't mean I love you any less. Emma needs a mother and I need a partner. Sarah makes us whole again." He'd worried that remarrying would feel like betrayal, but instead it felt like healing, like Maria's final gift to him and Emma, bringing them someone who could love them both completely. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful. As Sarah got ready in Emma's room, with her soon-to-be stepdaughter helping with her hair and makeup, she realized that this wasn't just a wedding day. It was the day their found family became official. The day she stopped being a woman without children and became Emma's mom forever. "You look beautiful." "Mom," Emma said, stepping back to admire Sarah in her simple white dress. "So do you, my beautiful daughter," Sarah replied, adjusting Emma's flower crown. Together, they walked toward the backyard where Jake waited under an arch of wildflowers, ready to begin their new chapter as an official family of 3. 2 years after their backyard wedding, Sarah stood in the same spot where they'd exchanged vows, but now she was watching Emma practice her lines for the school play. At 10 years old, Emma had grown confident and outgoing, a stark contrast to the quiet, grieving child Sarah had first met. "How do I look, Mom?" Emma asked, twirling in her costume. She was playing a pioneer woman in the school's production about Texas history. "Perfect," Sarah said, adjusting Emma's bonnet. "Your dad is going to be so proud when he sees you perform tonight." Jake emerged from the barn, having finished the evening chores early so they could get to the school on time. At 38, he looked younger than when Sarah had first met him. The constant worry lines had faded, replaced by laugh lines from the joy that had returned to their home. "My beautiful girls ready for opening night?" he asked, kissing Sarah's cheek and hugging Emma. "Dad, you have to promise not to cry when I do my big speech," Emma said seriously. "I make no such promises," Jake replied, grinning. I cried at your Christmas concert, your science fair presentation, and when you lost your first tooth. I have a reputation to maintain." As they drove to the school, Sarah reflected on how much their lives had changed. The legal adoption process had been completed 6 months after their wedding, making Sarah officially Emma's mother in the eyes of the law. The community had gradually accepted their unconventional family, especially as they watched Emma flourish under Sarah's care. The ranch was thriving too. Sarah had convinced Jake to start selling homemade preserves and baked goods at the farmer's market, using fruit from the orchard and vegetables from the garden she'd planted. The extra income had allowed them to make improvements to the property and even plan for Emma's college fund. At the school auditorium, Sarah and Jake found seats in the third row, close enough to see every expression on Emma's face. As the curtain rose and Emma stepped onto the stage, Sarah felt the familiar surge of maternal pride that still amazed her. Emma's voice was clear and strong as she delivered her lines about the challenges of frontier life. When she reached her big monologue about the importance of family and community, her eyes found Sarah and Jake in the audience. "Family isn't just who you're born to," Emma said. The words written by the playwright but delivered with personal conviction. "Family is who chooses to love you and stand by you no matter what. Family is who makes a house feel like home." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes and she reached for Jake's hand. He squeezed her fingers, understanding exactly what she was feeling. After the performance, as they waited in the lobby for Emma to change out of her costume, several other parents approached them. Mrs. Chen, whose daughter was Emma's best friend, smiled warmly at Sarah. "Emma was wonderful tonight," she said. "She's such a confident, happy child. You and Jake have done an amazing job with her." Sarah still felt a flutter of surprise when people acknowledged her role as Emma's mother so naturally. "Thank you. She worked really hard on her performance." Principal Williams, who had once questioned their family arrangement, stopped by to shake Jake's hand. "Emma's one of our star students," he said. "You should be very proud. Both of you." When Emma finally emerged from backstage, still glowing from the excitement of her successful performance, she ran straight to Sarah and Jake. "Did you see me? Did I remember all my lines?" she asked breathlessly. "You were absolutely perfect," Sarah said, pulling her daughter into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." "We both are," Jake added, joining the embrace. On the drive home, Emma chattered excitedly about the performance, already planning for next year's production. As they pulled up to the ranch, Sarah noticed the porch light Jake had left on, welcoming them home. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Sarah and Jake sat on their porch swing, enjoying the quiet night air. The tree they'd planted on their wedding day had grown taller, its branches reaching toward the star-filled sky. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been?" Jake asked quietly. Sarah considered the question. "Sometimes. But I can't imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else. Even with all the challenges we faced, the gossip, the questions about whether we were doing the right thing. Especially because of those challenges," Sarah said firmly. "They made us stronger, made us more sure of what we were building together." Jake was quiet for a moment, then said, "Emma asked me something interesting yesterday." "What was that?" "She asked if we might have more children someday. Brothers or sisters for her." Sarah's heart skipped. They'd talked about this possibility before, but carefully, knowing that Sarah was now 38 and they'd need to consider all the factors. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that was something we'd have to discuss as a family, that we'd see what the future holds." Sarah smiled in the darkness. "I think that's a very wise answer." 3 months later, Sarah sat in Dr. Martinez's office, staring at the ultrasound image in her hands. At 38, pregnancy hadn't been guaranteed, but the tiny heartbeat on the monitor confirmed what the home test had suggested. That evening, she and Jake told Emma together, unsure how their 10-year-old would react to the news that she might become a big sister. Emma's face went through several emotions: surprise, consideration, and then pure joy. "Really, a baby?" "Really," Sarah confirmed. "How do you feel about that?" Emma was quiet for a moment, then broke into the biggest smile they'd seen from her in weeks. "I think it's perfect. I've always wanted to be a big sister, and now I get to teach the baby everything you taught me." 9 months later, baby Maria Elena Whitefeather entered the world, named for both Emma's birth mother and Sarah's heritage. As Sarah held her newborn daughter while Emma carefully stroked the baby's tiny hand, She marveled at how life had a way of bringing unexpected gifts. "She's so little," Emma whispered in wonder. "You were once this little too," Jake said, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed with his arm around Emma. "Will you tell her about how our family started?" Emma asked. "About how you came to help Dad in the kitchen and then became my mom?" Sarah looked at her husband and her daughters, one chosen, one born to her, and felt overwhelmed by the fullness of her life. "I'll tell her all about it," Sarah promised, "about how sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that find each other when they need it most." Emma nodded solemnly. "And I'll tell her about my first mom too, so she knows all the love that came before her." Jake squeezed Sarah's shoulder and she saw tears in his eyes. Their family had started with a simple job posting and a little girl who just needed someone to believe she deserved love again. Now they were 4, bound not just by law or blood, but by the choice to keep showing up for each other every single day. Outside the hospital window, the Texas sun was setting over the ranch that had become their sanctuary. Emma was already making plans for teaching her baby sister to ride horses and braid hair and make pancakes for dinner when the mood struck. Sarah closed her eyes and listened to her family's voices mixing together. Jake's deep rumble, Emma's excited chatter, and baby Maria's soft breathing. This was what happiness sounded like, she realized. Not just contentment or satisfaction, but pure, overwhelming joy at being exactly where you were meant to be. Their story had begun with a simple want ad and a desperate father's need for help in the kitchen. But it had become something much more beautiful, a testament to the power of chosen family, second chances, and the courage to love again after loss. As night fell over the ranch, Sarah knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. They were no longer 3 separate people trying to heal from their wounds. They were a family complete and whole, ready for whatever adventures tomorrow might bring.